Channel Red Novel Chapter 1601, The Red Vampires. The Red Vampires. Quinn knew little about them from his talks with the others. They are one of the three groups of vampires that were around in the current time of the world and were one of the reasons why vampires had gotten so much hate from humans. It was said that these vampires were known for attacking humans, either to turn the latter or kill them. Quinn didn't know whether these vampires were a branch of the 13 families who believed vampires were a superior race compared to humans and should rule them, or were part of Laxmas's group. Maybe even a mix of both. However, seeing the symbol that Quinn had noticed on a few items and others before made him think. This symbol is similar to the one Laxmas had, right? Is this a marking? Is that how Laxmas was able to gain extra strength? It was clear what he had turned that day into something beyond that of a vampire, and I remember what he said was strange. Either this marking is something that these red vampires have just chosen to have on their bodies, or she might have been marked. Meaning she has a closer connection towards a celestial being. If that's the case, maybe there is something bigger behind these red vampires. It could just be a god that is tricking them all with a fake goal so that he could get stronger in the process. Sounds about right to me. Ray replied. The question is, how strong has this apparent god become during the time you were asleep? Remember, you have just become a celestial being and are only at the first level. Unless you are willing to create some followers and make them follow your condition, the only other way is to kill the other god's dedicated followers and absorb their energy. Looking at the vampire in front of him, Quinn could tell by the aura around her body. She honestly didn't see them as a threat and even believed that they were their ally. It could only be because of the bounty. What other reason would there be to put such a large bounty on one's head unless they were part of the red vampires? Then begged the other question. Shouldn't she do something to confirm Quinn's identity if he was a red vampire? Was Quinn now supposed to show his symbol to her to prove that they were part of the same group, or was it something only high-ranking members had? What I'm more worried about is what is or is a red vampire doing in this place. Are they planning an attack on this village? If so, it would be in my best interest to stop them. Perhaps it can be as easy as allowing them to take me to their leader and stopping him, putting an end to this red vampire mess. Eventually, Quinn decided to answer with the most suitable option to his situation. We are not red vampires, Quinn answered. Not yet anyway, but we wish to be. We had a small scuffle on one of the Greylash planets, and ever since, we have been on the run. We just found out about the large bounties now, and it looks like we messed with someone we shouldn't have. Quinn thought this little excuse or act should be good and vague enough to satisfy their questions. The female vampire looked the group up and down, and there was only one thing that wouldn't quite fit their group, that was Lucia. She was clearly smelt like a human but also had a bounty on her head for some reason. I see, if what you say is true, then come join us, though not all of you can join, but, yeah, we are always looking for those that are happy to join our cause, but there are also those that wish to try their best to hamper us. There are too many of you to introduce at once. If all goes well, I promise the red vampires will do their best to protect you. We always look after our kind. That's what being part of the red vampires is all about. The woman answered. Looking at the others, Quinn wondered what the best choice in front of him was. Who could he bring with him, and how they would split up the group for a short time. They would be away. After discovering more about the red vampires and their plans, he would reunite with them again. Jessica, Quinn said. Why don't you come along with me? Peter, make sure Minnie and Lucia are safe at all costs. I am trusting you. With the bounty on their heads, he was a little worried, but for some reason, he felt like Jessica, another vampire that knew more about the situation, would be a better option in this case rather than Peter. Yet, he needed someone strong enough to protect the others if anything happened to them. Minnie also had almost blown his cover several times, so bringing her wasn't a good idea. Very well, follow me, you two, and we can introduce ourselves and talk on the way. As the two groups split from each other, Minnie looked like tears were about to come out from her eyes. She had grown attached to Quinn, and saw Peter like an uncle. Peter gave a look as if to say that Quinn didn't have to worry. But of course, he would be worried about them. While walking, they had found out a few things. The vampire that they were currently following was named Hannah. She explained that she had been in this town for a while now, not just her, but a few others were with them as well. They were living here among the humans for years. This made Quinn wonder if certain humans had gone missing. Perhaps these red vampires worked in secret, taking them out slowly. Still, it wasn't something he could straight up ask. Eventually, Hannah went into one of the small shops and pulled out robes that were of the same design as what the others on the street were wearing, except for one thing: these had hoodies as well. It would be best to cover up now that you are wanted. I can't wait to hear what you guys did to get a bounty of that size on your head. Hannah smiled. They took the robes, covered themselves, and followed Hannah along. Honestly, she didn't talk much about the red vampires and just went on about how lovely the town was, which was a little confusing for Quinn, but he decided not to rush and take one step at a time. How many of you are there? Quinn asked. In this town, there are a total of 5 of us, but more will be coming soon, so you are just in luck. She replied. Although, initially, Quinn actually meant about the whole of the red vampires, thinking he might get a number. The vampire settlements were never large in numbers, but they could be in a completely different state with no restrictions on their population anymore. Eventually, the 3 of them had arrived at what looked like an entrance to a cave. They were away from the busy parts of town and could see the lights off in the distance, and no one seemed to have followed them. When heading inside, Quinn could hear the sound of talking that soon stopped. Their footsteps were quiet, so it was apparent that they were approaching. I have a guest, so please be on your best behavior, you lot, Hannah said. Taking a turn in the cave, they saw a group of 4. All of them were vampires, just as Hannah had said, but that wasn't the shocking thing about them. For Quinn, it was what was on their faces. Those masks, Quinn said. Oh, it looks like you already know quite a bit about the red vampires then. We wear these masks whenever for a meeting among the members. Hannah explained and soon pulled out a mask from under her shirt. It was a red mask, with 2 large teeth on the sides. It was half of a red Oni mask. Not just that, but it looked identical to the one that Quinn used to wear when he fought in the past. This mask is to remind us of who we worship. Hearing those words, Quinn could feel his heart beating faster. It can't be. Many don't know this, but the great hero Quinn Talon used to wear this. Now Quinn was really starting to scratch his head. Channel Red Novel Chapter 1602, The End Goal. Upon seeing and hearing this, the first thing that Quinn thought was that he was glad that he didn't bring Peter. The latter would have straight up laughed and perhaps offended these vampires, and unlike the humans before, it would have quite possibly caused a head-on argument before they ended up finding out about anything. Still, this was something Quinn wasn't expecting. The red vampires worship me, not Laxmus or Bryce, but me. That doesn't make any sense. The humans see me as a hero, and so do the vampires. I fought to save them both. I introduced both of them to the world. So why would the red vampires worship me? It was beginning to make Quinn's blood boil thinking about it. Someone perhaps used his name to convince these vampires to do something they never wished to do, and he now wanted to get to the bottom of this situation. Thankfully, someone was by his side that looked to be just as shocked as he was, which meant this wasn't public knowledge to them all. You also worship the hero Quinn. This is the first time I am hearing something like this, Jessica said out loud, and immediately had stares coming from all the others in the room. It was making her feel a little nervous. I mean, I never knew. Do you mind telling us why, so we can learn more and become a closer part of the red vampires? She smiled. Seeing this, Quinn felt like he had made the right choice in bringing her. The group moved closer before they explained, and Quinn carefully looked at all of their faces. He was wondering if he might recognize one of them. It was hard with only the bottom part of their masks, but it seemed like they were all strangers. They all feel as strong as Hannah, there aren't really any special ones among them. Quinn thought. I need to meet someone in a higher position or strength if I want to know more about them, but let's do one thing at a time. Do you really think we can trust these guys? One of the vampires shouted out. I'm not comfortable with you bringing random vampires to our meeting spot. The other shouted. Please, we are meant to be welcoming to any vampires that wish to join our cause. Hannah replied, folding her arms. Besides, here is my reason for trusting and bringing them in. It was then, from her wristwatch, that the image of their bounties had appeared. And reading the amount of money displayed under their name and faces nearly made their eyes pop out. Unlike before, where vampires cared little for the world currency, now that they were involved in the current world, they cared for it quite a bit. They all knew that these vampires had to have done something pretty serious to get a bounty on their heads like that. It cleared up a lot of the suspicions the others had. The group sat down on some logs placed in a circle. Quinn, along with Jessica, sat on the same wooden log on the ground. About your question earlier, since you're going to be a part of our group, I will explain a few things for you. We believe that Quinn Talon had a different goal after saving the humans. Hannah started to explain. There are many that believe that he wanted humans to work alongside vampires, but there is another side to it. What if he didn't? I did. Quinn wanted to say but kept his mouth shut. The vampire settlement, there was no need for it to be moved back then as he had done so. At the same time, Quinn had turned every human close to him, from his friends to those in his group, into a vampire. With this mask, we believe he was trying to hide another side to him. Hearing this, Quinn could somewhat understand how they had come to that conclusion, especially after 1,000 years. But one would seriously have to twist a few things to think this way. If the cursed faction were still publicly involved in the current world, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. This is a belief that all of the red vampires can agree on. Hannah continued. But because of this, there is something that not all of the red vampires agree on, and that splits us into two groups. One side wants to kill humans or rule over them. Then there are those like us who wish to show humans the benefits of being a vampire and then turn them. Some in our group might be a bit forceful. However, I am not like that. Although it could have been easy to disregard and not believe what Hannah was saying, there was a smile on her face when she said the last line. Quinn had seen the same smile when Hannah was talking to the other humans. He wanted to believe what she was saying, and he did believe what she was saying. Although he still felt it was wrong to try and turn others into vampires rather than letting those who wish to be human to let them be humans, at least she wasn't forceful about it. So there are even good vampires in the Red Vampire group. Quinn thought. The whole situation was certainly complicated, so he was happy he hadn't decided outright to destroy all the red vampires for causing difficult troubles for the other vampires. Okay, that's great you told them about our view of the hero Quinn. One of the men from earlier interrupted. But should we really talk about our mission before knowing if our leader has accepted them? Well, I think if someone does find out what we plan to do, then we can track them down quite easily. Besides, today is just an update, and I think they might be able to help us. Hannah explained. Sitting upright, Quinn was ready to hear carefully. If they did plan to do something to this town, he would stop them. Perhaps not kill them, but at least stop them. Our goal, for the time being, is to keep gathering information from the town. Honestly, I think they know nothing, but it's just for a while as we wait for the others to arrive. Once they have arrived, we will head to the Vampire Corps base and join them. Join the Vampire Corps? Jessica repeated. Are you planning on leaving the Red Vampires to join the Corps? The others laughed at this comment, showing how unlikely that was to be the case, but that only meant they would be joining undercover. What do they have that you need? Quinn asked, getting straight to the point. We need to know how close they are to finding the Red Heart. Now, you might not know about this because it's not general knowledge, but there is another reason we decided to brand ourselves the name Red Vampires, not just because red is the color of our eyes and the blood we feast on. No, it's because, despite the two groups' visions not aligning with each other, we work together to find one thing. The thing that our hero left us. The red heart. When saying hero, it was obviously referring to Quinn, but red heart? Quinn didn't remember leaving a red heart anywhere. What is this red heart that you are looking for, and why are you looking for it? Quinn asked. Quinn Talon created the red heart during the fight with the Dalki leader. A condensed form of blood gathered and concentrated to the strongest degree, creating a blood crystal that we call the red heart. Now Quinn knew exactly what Hannah was talking about, and he did indeed create it, but it looks like the cursed faction didn't have possession of it. Has it gone missing? The red heart will give us the power to turn everyone into a vampire. We have to get our hands on that before any of the other groups do. Channel Red Novel Chapter 1603, What Are You? After getting split up from Quinn and his group, the remaining three needed to decide what they would do next, making Lucia and Minnie stare at Peter for answers. Well, we don't know when they will come back, so I guess our best bet is just to stay in this town. After saying those words, standing in the middle of a busy street, Peter folded his arms. The two girls waited for a while and noticed that some of the travelers were still looking towards them, some of them pulling something up on their wristwatch and other devices, perhaps comparing the bounty posters with the faces of the three. In the end, the girls looked at each other and then looked towards Peter like he was meant to do something, but he had yet to move from the same spot. In fact, he didn't even blink. He just stood there with his arms crossed. Is he dead? Lucia whispered, to which Minnie shrugged her shoulders and started to run up to Peter, climbing on top of his back until she eventually sat on his shoulders. It was quite a thing for a young girl like her to do, but then Lucia realized that she was, after all, a vampire. Tapping Peter's forehead, Minnie was waiting for a reaction but still managed to get nothing out of him at all. Okay, I can't take it anymore, all these people staring at us. I need to go into a shop and get some clothes to cover myself up. Lucia said as she stormed off towards a clothes shop, not bothering whether Peter was coming along or not. Hey, Uncle Peter, I think we should follow her and go along with her. Remember what Daddy Quinn said? That we should protect ourselves as best as we can. I think that included her as well. Minnie said in her childish voice. You might be right, she is the one with the money after all. Following into the clothes shop after Lucia, the two noticed that the clothes were similar to what the people in the town were wearing. It was a single piece of clothing that covered the legs and upper body part, with a piece that tied around one's waist. Although they all looked the same, the design and pattern on each of them were different. Even the colors, among other things, had variations, and there were with hoods too, the types which Lucia now had in her hands. On top of that, when she went to the table, she had already picked out two more that looked to be a fit for both Minnie and Peter. After turning around, she paused in surprise to see that Peter had moved from his spot and followed her. I thought you were going to stand there even if the world was to end. Lucia joked as she handed him the outfit. Is this for us? I didn't ask you for one, and you didn't know we were in the shop and bought one for us anyway. Peter replied. Of course she did. Minnie said, grabbing her clothes as well. Lucia is a kind auntie. I think you mean sister, but I'll let it go. Lucia smiled. It was the first time that Peter had seen her smile, and for him, naturally seeing her face, he had decided to smile back at her as well. Oh, the zombie can smile. Upon hearing those words, Peter's smile quickly disappeared. Although he knew that she meant nothing by those words, as Lucia had no idea what Peter was, it made him realize once again that he was no longer a human. The three of them quickly changed clothes, and Peter still placed his armor and weapons carefully under the arm compartment. Wearing the armor made him look bulkier, but at the same time, it didn't make it too apparent that he was a traveler. Coming out from the changing rooms, Peter saw Minnie hustle out in a red-styled dress with golden dragons rising to the top. She didn't wear her mask, as she had recently learned to control her shadow powers and had hidden it in there for the time being, but Peter had to admit that the red dress along with the mask was quite the stylish set. Then Lucia came out. Honestly, the clothes weren't too different from what she usually wore. However, the dress was more tight-fitting around her body. At the same time, it was white with a golden dragon pattern running up both sides. It looked like she had somewhat sorted out her hair as well. Brushing it out, she allowed it to flow down the sides. "How do I look?" Lucia asked. "You look good," Peter said, and nothing else, which for some reason embarrassed Lucia a bit as she quickly left the shop, and tracking her closely was Minnie. Peter stared at the exit for a moment, and then he too walked out. Soon, the three of them were strolling down the street. They wouldn't leave the town, but now with different clothes, they could still explore a little without the stairs. Peter also wondered where exactly had the clothes from before gone. After asking Lucia, Peter learned that she was using a storage ring. It had a limited capacity, but it worked similar to Quinn's dimensional space. It allowed one to store items inside a ring, necklace, or more. This had become quite common after the discovery of a new crystal in the vampire solar system. Eventually, while they were walking, they suddenly heard a growl. "Are you hungry?" Peter asked. He had forgotten that Lucia was a human, in other words, she could succumb to these things. "I mean, it wouldn't hurt to grab a bite," she replied. The three had entered a large restaurant that was 2 floors high. There were around 50 or so round tables with customers occupying most of them, and it was bustling with food and drinks shared all around. Still, they managed to get a seat quickly, as Peter had run over to one as soon as it was empty before anyone else, claiming it. There were a few annoyed looks, but Minnie smiled at them, conveying sorry, which let the other customer ignore the group and mind their own business. After looking at the menu, Lucia ordered food for herself, and the waiter, with a small notebook in his hand, scribbled Lucia's order and then glanced towards the other two. "I'm okay, thanks. I won't be having anything," Peter answered. "Same for me," Minnie said with a smile. "I didn't realize that the two of you were going to make me eat on my own. It's quite embarrassing." Lucia added, "You know, they do serve blood at this establishment. Times have changed now, they won't look at you strangely for drinking blood." Although Peter had seen blood on the menu, he couldn't see something that he could eat. At the same time, even if it was on the menu, it wasn't something he would have wanted to eat in front of Lucia, though he didn't know why he thought about this. "I don't drink blood, and I'm not a vampire," Peter replied. "If I did eat in front of you, it would just make you sick." "Not a vampire, so what are you?" The second Lucia had finished asking her question, she noticed a large man walking towards their table, towering above them. He had already swung his hammer, which was already above his head, coming towards them too fast for her to react. It was then that she saw the hammer hit right into Peter's side, crushing the bones in his shoulder and arms, and the next second he was gone from her sight. He crashed through several tables and right into the restaurant wall on the other side. As the onlookers looked at Peter, they could see the strike had utterly crushed the right side of his body. There were screams from all around as they were sure that he was dead, and not just that, but several people whom he had crashed into had died as well. It was clear that the man with that hammer was not an ordinary one, and behind him, there were other people as well. Upon raising her head, Lucia noticed red tribal tattoos that ran down his face, and they continued up to his wrist. "No, it's the AAA rank traveler group, the Behemoths," Lucia said, shaking in fear. The traveler groups had ranks assigned to them just like before the war, and although they weren't large factions like there used to be in the past, their ranks gave approximate evaluation of their strength. "That's right." The large man with a hammer chuckled. "We couldn't believe that those with such a large bounty would come to a town like this, and now that you have come, how can we simply waste such an opportunity?" Lucia looked towards Minnie, who was still at the table. She wondered what to do. Even the original vampire she feared couldn't face such a group if he were here. "Ah!" Just then, everyone heard a scream coming from the side of the room. Turning their heads for a split second, they saw the man struck by the hammer was moving from the wall, and at the same time, in front of their eyes, his body was healing. The crushed bones and the torn flesh were getting back to normal, except for the clothes on his body. This led to the robe only covering 3/4 of his body. How is that possible? What is he? Someone whispered, but in the pin-drop silence, everyone heard it. Glancing towards the man that just hit him, Peter rushed off from his feet, his fist covered in a strange aura, and before anyone could react, it slammed right into the large man's face, pushing him through several of the tables, chairs, and the wall of the building. They saw a big hole when they looked at where the man had gone. He went through the building and was now lying on the other side of the street. Just think of me as a zombie, Peter spoke, answering Lucia's earlier question as the last few scratches on his arm healed. Channel Red Novel Chapter 1604, What is your goal? Unlike the mud mask that Peter would make using his soul weapon, the disguise that originated from his ability wouldn't go away from being hit. However, he did have to use his ability's MC cells to keep it the way he was before, and that was exactly what he was doing. Some members of the Behemoth gang ran outside to check on their friend, and a few seconds later they loudly lamented his fate. He's dead. The whole restaurant turned to look at Peter. Some inside had seen his poster, while others had no clue who he was, but they were sure of one thing. This person was strong. To be able to kill someone from a AAA ranked traveler group with one punch was unheard of. What's more, they had been unable to see him move from his position from the wall. Lastly, the strange healing powers that allowed him to heal from even cracked bones. Damn it, if I had been paying attention to my surroundings, I wouldn't have even let that hammer hit me, and now I've been hurt as well. Peter thought. I really should keep practicing chi like Quinn suggested, that also would have helped me from protecting myself and my body from being crushed, and now she's looking at me like that. Turning his head towards Lucia, he thought that she would have freaked out given his abnormal healing speed. Many people did when they saw it, however, she was just left with her mouth wide open. While I don't know all of their members, the Behemoths wouldn't just let anyone join their group, yet he was able to kill one of them with a single hit. Lucia thought. No, I shouldn't be surprised. I have to get used to the fact that I'm not traveling with someone normal. If Nate is an original, does that mean he was also someone from that era? But I don't recognize him. How dare you kill Rodero? Another large, burly man pointed his weapon at Peter. It seemed like the Behemoth group were filled with large, bulky people who mostly used large weapons. There were giant axes, hammers, great swords and more. You three have officially become our Behemoth's enemies. We plan to hunt most of you down alive, but you can now forget about it. Anyone who wishes to help us shall obtain a share of the reward. Everyone else, get out. The man announced. Hearing this, several people that were inside the restaurant quickly left the restaurant, scared to get involved in the fighting. However, there were other traveler groups that were interested in the bounty on their heads, and with a strong faction backing them, even after seeing what Peter had done, they weren't afraid. There had been 10 Behemoth members in the establishment, but with the other groups, their force numbered around 30. Once the area was cleared, the large man by the name of Edu pulled out a giant axe and swung it towards Lucia, who was closest to him. The two of them were quite a far distance away, so she didn't even think it would hit her. Still, she pulled out her spear just in case to try to defend herself and was ready to fight for her life. That's when the axe started to grow in size, becoming gigantic, almost covering half of the restaurant. It looked like the man's ability allowed him to make weapons larger, and she could tell it wasn't just large, but judging by the surrounding wind, the weight of the weapon seemed to have increased as well. All I can do is block this hit, with my chi. She thought, getting her spear ready and moving it to the side. However, before the gigantic axe could hit her, it had stopped, and the other saw that one man was responsible for it, holding the sharp edge of the axe with his fingers. Don't worry, I was told to protect you and Minnie, so as long as you stay with me, I'll make sure that nobody will be able to harm a single hair on your head," Peter stated. Looking at his fingertips, Lucia could see they were covered in a strange yellow glow. "Is that chi? But then why can I see it? I've never seen chi in such a solid form. Just how much strength does he have to stop that large weapon?" It wasn't just that, as the next second, gripping tightly the white had broken the head on the axe, which he quickly grabbed with both hands as the others came towards him and pulled it out from Edu's hands. The axe was shrinking by the second, but before the axe it had reverted to its normal size. Peter swung it as hard and fast as he could. The handle part of it hit the behemoth members as well as the others in the restaurant. No matter what ability or active armor they had used to try to block the attack, they were swept off her feet and crashed through the restaurant's walls out to the other side of the feet. "Hee, Uncle Peter is so strong," Minnie called out in excitement as she watched this. Strong is an understatement. He has abnormal healing, strange chi, and inhuman strength. Any one of those would make him a powerhouse, yet he has all three. That guy could be one of the strongest people in the world, and he's right here by my side. Lucia mumbled to herself. Just how could it be that the world doesn't remember someone like him? Those that had been on the second floor, ready to attack, suddenly reconsidered their approach. Still, as Peter walked out the front of the building, Lucia quickly followed him along with Minnie, and they had only taken a few steps when she had stopped. "What is all this? Does everyone on Mars know where we are?" She panicked. Lucia was unsure about their exact number, but she was certain they had to number in the hundreds, travelers everywhere. It wasn't just members of the Behemoth group, there were also other prominent traveler groups standing on the rooftops, out from the other buildings and lining up down the street. Before the others could even act or say anything, Peter ran straight towards the first man and kneed him in the face, crushing his skull and killing him instantly. The white then let go, causing him to fall on the floor. "If you plan to stand in my way of protecting those two, I don't care how many of you I will have to kill," Peter stated, as he knelt down by the crushed man's face and pressed his hand on him. "Wake up!" The white shouted, and the next moment the clearly dead man started to stand up again, completely ignoring the fact that his skull had just been crushed. "Kill them!" A man shouted, and it looked like everyone was ready to attack Peter and the others, not caring whether this town might get destroyed in the process. Inside the cave where Quinn and the others were, it looked like one of the vampires had been informed about what was happening in the town. Quinn could hear it clearly, and so could everyone else. Multiple factions had entered the town in search of a bounty, and they didn't care about the people of the place. "Do you know these people?" the vampire asked. "Yes," Quinn replied. "I'm not too worried about them, but the trouble or fighting it might cause. There might be a bloodbath." The others thought Quinn was exaggerating, or perhaps didn't know what factions exactly had arrived in the place. "These are high-level factions, Hannah. If we get involved in saving these vampires, there is a good chance that our group could get wiped out. We need to stick to the mission." The man next to her cautioned the red vampire. "And what mission is that exactly?" Jessica interrupted. "To search for the Red Heart. I thought you said that your goal was to turn humans into vampires. Well, then, why don't you save them from these attackers? Why don't you actually help people? If you showed them your strength and what you're capable of, I'm pretty sure that would be a good way to convince people into turning them into vampires, don't you think?" After saying the words, Jessica was a bit silent, wondering if she had taken it a step too far, but she soon saw a smile on Hannah's face. The new girl is right. More and more factions will probably come. We need to save who we can from the fighting and move the fighting to somewhere else. We will try our best to help out your friends before it is too late," Hannah stated. Then, out from the inside of her pocket, she passed Jessica something and went over to Quinn, giving him the same item. "Please put it on. We are going to make sure to let them know that the red vampires were the ones that saved them. This mask will soon become a symbol to all those out there." Looking at it, Quinn felt like he was going back to his old days as he grabbed it and placed it on his face. Channel Red Novel Chapter 1605, Protect is an order. After witnessing the sight in front of her, it would be an understatement to say that Lucia was amazed by everything around her because she watched a single man take on several high-ranking travelers at once. At that moment, Peter raised 4 people he had killed in the fight so far. He then ordered 2 of them to stay close to Lucia and Minnie to protect them and not let them get involved in the fight. At the same time, the remaining 2 would be supporting Peter during the fight. A strong blast of ice energy came toward him from his right side, but before it could even hit him, one of his lesser whites sacrificed itself, taking the hit. Seeing this, Peter didn't hesitate to smash the ice that contained his white and forcefully threw the body part towards the ice user, aiming towards him, high up on one of the roofs of the buildings. In the next second, he ran towards another man and kicked him, sending him flying into the building on the opposite side and destroying the wall in the process. It was clear that there was currently no one here who was stronger or faster than Peter. However, with the sheer amount of travelers that were there and them working together being in the same factions together, they had their ways. Now, one of them shouted, and immediately, from underneath, the ground had exploded. The explosion chucked up dirt in front of Peter and blocked his view. It was then that those that were using long-ranged weapons fired towards the cloud of dust, and those with ranged abilities also added their attacks in the ensuing assault. It was impossible for anyone to avoid, even if they had his speed. Regardless, when the smoke settled, all they could see was Peter holding up another traveler by their head, only using his finger strength. At the same time, Peter's body was slowly healing from the edges he was hit on. Dropping the body on the ground, Peter proceeded to pull out what looked like a beast bolt that had gone through his arm. "Always protect the head," Peter mumbled to himself. "It's good that I actually listened to that rule." A beast bolt actually managed to pierce quite deep through my arm. I wondered why someone had put such high bounties on our heads. Lucia frowned. At first, I thought it was all a mistake or a misunderstanding, but now it looks like that's not the case. The bounty was for him and that vampire. These 2, someone must have known their real strength. I knew something was up when that other one got Xynon's armor. The attack in the hotel was aimed at them, but why would someone put a bounty on their heads? At that moment, a powerful blast hit the familiar in front of her, causing the lesser weight to fall to the ground. Several pillars of earth spikes began to rise from the ground, and Lucia quickly jumped and avoided them all. She could feel the rumbling under her feet and was quick to act. During her jump, though, she had grabbed onto Minnie as well. "I'm sorry," Minnie shouted out, feeling pretty useless, almost on the verge of tears. "It's not your fault. It's these people who are blinded by the greed of money. I mean, look what's happening," Lucia replied. It was then they noticed that even the people who weren't taking part in the fight were now injured. The owners of the restaurants and other buildings were close to pulling out their hair in despair upon witnessing the state of their shops. At the same time, the remaining bystanders were shaking in fear. However, she had no time to worry about that. There were still things she needed to do. Getting her spear ready, she thrust it forward towards the traveler that stood closest to her. A lightning strike left her spear, but an earth wall rose, blocking the attack. Despite this, the lighting, midway, seemed to get a second surge of strength as it sped up and blasted right through the earth wall. The strike continued and hit the man in the chest, causing him to fall to the ground and convulse uncontrollably. Earth users have always been tough for lighting users to go against. So I had to use some of my chi in that attack. But I can't keep using chi. Otherwise, I'll be exhausted. In the middle of her thoughts, before she could react, she was pulled up off the ground, and in the next moment, holding her under his arm, was Peter. Minnie, who was now unconscious, was in Lucia's grasp. "My job is to protect the both of you. I almost forgot that, and I'm sorry," Peter explained. "I could probably beat all of these guys myself, but you are the priority." Jumping up from a ledge, Peter made it onto one of the roofs. The best way for the others to not get hurt was to run away from the situation or get to an area where Peter could fight them more easily. However, there were several travelers on the roof, as if waiting for them. One had a super speed ability, and he ran right towards Peter with 2 daggers and jumped towards the trio. Peter also jumped at the right moment, and still holding the other 2, he kicked the incoming traveler's arm, breaking it in an instant as the dagger fell off of the latter's hands. As soon as Peter's foot hit the ground, he lifted it again and kicked the traveler in the stomach, causing blood to gush out of his mouth. "You should put us down, it will make it easier for you to fight," Lucia asked. "Also, you're going to get tired quicker if you continue like this." "I don't get tired," Peter replied as he continued to run forward, jumping side from side, avoiding a range of different abilities. As they landed on the rooftops, the tiles below their feet would crack and burst in all directions. Sensing some type of invisible wall, an ability from one of the travelers, he didn't stop and ran forward at full speed. Peter smashed the barrier, but he was slowed down in the process, and now they had surrounded him. "I know you're strong, but the number of travelers coming here is countless. There is nothing we can do. You take the child and get out of here," Lucia shouted. "No," Peter shouted as he held on to Lucia tighter, now grabbing her with both arms. He was holding her as if she was his bride in his arms. Then, lifting his leg, he stomped on the ground. It destroyed the rooftop, causing them to fall down, but not just with the part of the roof below his feet, rather, the whole rooftop was going down. Peter collapsed the building structure from a single stomp. The travelers stepped back, waiting for the outcome, but they had seen this zombie of a person come out from a much worse state than this, and they were sure it would be the same again, and they knew they were right when they saw the pile of rubble suddenly move. Covered in blood, Peter stood up with injuries on his head but had safely protected the 2 girls. "Why?" Lucia shouted. "Why are you doing so much to protect me?" Something like this, she had never had someone in her life do something like this for her. She wondered whether Peter was doing this because my friend told me to, and I will do anything he tells me to do even if it costs my life, Peter replied. With the travelers still unwilling to give up, it looked like they still had a lot of fights to go through. "Those were some good words, and I would do the same for you, my friend." A familiar voice resounded through the scene. The travelers who stood on the rooftops of nearby buildings weren't quick to act because now they could see that these 3 weren't alone anymore. Shielding Peter's group from the travelers were 7 people, all wearing strange red masks over their faces. "We are the Red Vampires," Hannah declared, walking out in front. "Look what you've done to this peaceful town. Because of you outsiders, this place is now destroyed, and we won't let you continue acting like this." From the look in the travelers' eyes, Quinn, who was also in the group of 7, was sure that the travelers wouldn't back down so easily. Recognizing the voice from earlier, Minnie, who had now regained her composure, immediately hopped off from Lucia and ran towards Quinn. They tried to kill us." Minnie started crying as she tugged on his leg. The other vampires seeing this wondered what sort of vampire traveled with their daughter like this, doing these things. It also gave the image that this vampire was quite soft. Rubbing the top of her head, Quinn bent down to her height. "I see, well, don't worry. I will make sure they never try that again." Upon hearing what Quinn had said, the vampires thought he was just trying to reassure his daughter. It was then, after standing up, Quinn looked at all the travelers and sighed. One of them moved slightly, less than an inch forward, in the next second. Lifting his hand, Quinn shaped it like a gun, and out from his finger, a blood bullet shot out, hitting him right in the knee, making him fall off the roof and onto the floor. It was strange because it had happened so fast that everyone froze, wondering what had just happened. Thanks for watching and subscribe my channel.